This is Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon call on Discord. It's 4 o'clock Thai time and morning time for Europe. So, Mikey, take it away. You've got an announcement to make.
Yeah, so last week we asked for funds to donate for a bike for Open Sangha Foundation for use by me and other Sangha members who come here to Thailand, to this island. And previously it was owned by Pra Daniel, so we decided we'd like to buy the bike from him and support his life in the robes that way. And we have officially raised more than enough money. We asked for about $900, and we have something like $950 now. So thank you guys so much for donating for that, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Timo, could you hear him? Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear me. Does anybody have any trouble hearing right now, hearing me talk? All right. So, today's talk is going to be on Sati and friends. I say it like that because we're going to spend quite a lot of time with Sati, but basically this is going to be a talk on the Eightfold Noble Path, most specifically as stated in Sutta number 117, which is the Great 40. Now, the first part of the sutta starts off with that the Buddha is going to teach the Eightfold Noble Path. Actually, what he says is not teach the Eightfold Noble Path. That's not even mentioned anywhere. That's actually an invention. What he said was that he's going to teach right unification of mind, right organization of mind with its supports and its features. And so, most specifically, we're going to be talking about the features and a little bit about the the supports. In other words, what we do first in order to get a right unification or right organization of mind, and then what does that look like? So, when we say right unification of mind or right organization of mind, the Pali word also would be samadhi. Now, samadhi, then, if you'll read it the way that it's written in there, as well as other places, like for instance in the Sambojana, what we actually are seeing is that the right unification of mind, the right organization of mind, is actually the outcome of practicing the supports, and that Sati is actually one of the supports. And so I know that there was a question about what's the difference between Sati and Samadhi. The answer is that we start with Samadhi, and eventually, in fact, if you're practicing well, very quickly you wind up with right organization of mind. So, then the Buddha says is that right noble view comes first. Now, what he's talking about is not necessarily chronological order, but he is talking about it in the sense that it's the big deal. And so he talks about it first, and we'll talk about 3 kinds of view. Hello, Dietrich. Welcome. Glad to see you. The 3 kinds of view or viewing, actually 2 of them are nouns or concepts. The way that we look, world view, a point of view. And then the third one is more of a verb in the sense of looking or watching. So the first one that's discussed is called wrong view. Now, wrong view actually has the quality of um, chaos. It has the quality of, in fact, the catchphrase for it would be, "I can get away with it." We can go do anything and get away with it. Now, the way that it's stated in the sutta, it talks about um, that there is no father, there is no mother, there are no saints, there are no uh, restrictions, there's no rules or anything. And so this is why it would be called bedlam or chaos, which is basically the criminal's attitude. If I can go do anything I want to do and get away with it. You could also say that wrong view is also the view of a child, especially the little tyrant or the terrible twos. Now, ordinary right view then is kind of the opposite of that, in the sense that there is mother and father, there are saints, there are rules, in fact. And you could say then that these two are exactly opposite. One is chaos and one is all rules. This is how it's supposed to be. You could say it also is that it's idealistic. You could also say that, in fact, that it's in Freudian language, it's the superego of the mind, in the sense that it's got rites, rules, rituals, it's supposed tos, it's got limits, it's got structure, it's got police, it's got teachers, it's got saints, priests, all of those kind of things, to where wrong view says no, there's no restrictions. And so we can say then that the child tries to get away with anything. He tries out all kinds of stuff, and the parent ego state is that which trying to restrict him. And now the third is not a viewpoint or a way of looking. It in fact is directly looking. It's noticing clearly. And this is called right noble view. And this is what the Buddha is teaching, is right noble view. Now, it has two friends. Right noble view, in fact, right noble viewing cannot be done unless you remember to do it. The fallback position is either in the child's position or wrong view, or the parent position of structure. That in fact you could say that the way that we live the world would be the difference between and the interaction between how things are supposed to be, the idealism, and what we want, which would be then the child. So the idealism is all of the structure, all the rules and everything. And then right noble viewing is looking to see how things actually are. So this is the way that we're going to be practicing, is by remembering to come out of our parent, come out of our idealism, come out of our supposed to, shoulds, woulds, coulds, and also come out of our liking and not liking, the child ego state, and come into what Eric Berne then would call the adult, or the actual um, wisdom part of the mind, is seeing things the way that they are. But this is not a normal way of looking, the way that humans have. They get stuck in the other two. And so we have to add an new ingredient to that, and that is sati. Sati, what is sati? Sati is remembering to look, remembering to be here now. It has been mistranslated in English as the word mindfulness, and you probably heard mindfulness. In fact, mindfulness coming out of Western Buddhism has gotten so popular that even the politicians are using the word mindfulness, to where the word mindfulness didn't exist 50 years ago. Didn't exist. It wasn't around. Well, 50, 70 years ago, let's say. Um, no, about 50 years ago. But anyway, the point is that we have to remember to use a different part of the mind. We have to remember to come into the present moment to look at what's really going on in the mind. In fact, you could say that we'll have a thought, and that thought will either come out of the parent or the child, and then the adult will come in and examine and investigate that thought to look at what we're thinking. Now, often what I see on Discord is that people will think about complaining thoughts and then type out their complaint and hit the enter key and continue to complain without even recognizing that they would, if they could remember, to have a choice not to post unwholesome things. That what we're encouraging people, in fact, is to use the Discord as a meditation aid or a tool to make sure that what we're posting is wholesome as opposed to unwholesome. Well, what does that mean? Okay, what that actually means is that once we remember to look and then to see clearly what our thoughts are, we have a choice then. Now, the choice is the third item on the Eightfold Noble Path, and that choice is actually referred to as right noble effort. The right noble effort is to make a change. And the sutra most specifically talks about it is taking unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome attitudes out and replacing it with wholesome. In other words, we see that the unwholesome is actually a hindrance, hindering us from feeling good, and that when we remember to look and make a change, the change is actually to come into a good state, to come into um, a happy place. Then, in fact, we could say then that the close friend of this sutta number 117 in the Majjhima Nikaya is number 118, which is the Anapanasati Sutta. These two sutras are companions in the sense that the Eightfold Noble Path is that which we are practicing, and we practice it by the method of the Anapanasati Sutta. And so in the Anapanasati Sutta, it mentions the term of gladdening the mind. Now, here, the gladdening of the mind is actually changing our attitude or changing our state of mind from a dependent, a selfish, victim's position into a wholesome position. In other words, a winner's attitude as opposed to the victim's attitude, which we normally have. Now, how we gladden the mind is actually by changing our thoughts. And if we keep changing our thoughts, we will actually begin to change our attitude. Because the Anapanasati Sutta actually points out that things are interdependent, that your feelings affect your mind and your mind states affect your thoughts. We can back that up, though. We can use that to our advantage. We can start changing the thoughts, and by changing the thoughts, we change our attitude, and by changing our attitude, we actually are able to change our feelings. We can learn to control our feelings. Now, this society that we're in, this human society, does not have any clue about how to change one's feelings. In fact, the predominant aspect is to change your behavior. Well, we're probably going to have difficulty changing our behavior because we've already got the thought and also the feelings and the attitude that's going to drive our behavior. But if we can come back to recognize that the thought, that the mind is the forerunner, that all behavior springs from the mind. And so this is where we're going to work mostly, is to work with the attitude by changing our thoughts from unwholesome thought to wholesome thought. Now, we practice this over and over and over again because it's almost like spring loaded, that we go back into the habit patterns that we have established over our lives, which means we automatically jump back either into right ordinary view or wrong view. In fact, the default position for everybody is wrong view. And so we have to remember to look. And by the looking, that brings us into the the adult state. And then that adult state is where we actually make the change. That's where the real action comes in, is when we're actually changing our mind before any behavior, any actions take place. So this would be then what many people would refer to as meditation, to where, you're sitting there with your body still, and you're probably in a special room that's got an altar and maybe some incense and a candle, and you're sitting squatting on the floor in pain and all of that. You all know what meditation is. But anapanasati does not have to have a particular posture. It does not have to have any of the accoutrements. It doesn't have to have a bell to ring. Doesn't need anything other than to remember to start practicing wherever you are, right here, right now. Now, sati is actually a skill that is to be developed. We have to remember over and over and over again. And so there is some value, some use for having a bit of formal practice. However, sitting for an hour is not going to help very much. That in fact, after about 20 minutes, the normal mind, um, let's say, loses its ability to stay involved. We call it attention span. And teachers and educational people, they have learned that, especially children, but even adults have an attention span of something about 20 minutes at the best. And so having long sitting meditations of 45 minutes or an hour generally means that somewhere in there, the thoughts go into all unwholesome all the time, like, when's the bell going to ring? And oh, my legs hurt. And oh, this is so hard to do. And accompanied by the thoughts of, this will be good for me. No pain, no gain. And I see this meditation as a lot of pain. Well, there is the suttas. In fact, in many, many different suttas, including the Dhammapada, there is the place where it says that the teachings of the Buddha are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right phrasing and meaning and timing. But most meditation practices that are done in the West start off maybe good for 3 or 4 or 5, 10 minutes, and then it gets bad. And then it gets painful. And then it gets downright ornery. I don't want to be here. And so this is the reason why a lot of people leave meditation retreats, is because it's not delivering what they wanted it to be delivered. But there's another way of practicing, and that is to sit down for shorter periods of time. Now, this is especially for the beginner. As we progress over much time, in fact, for monks and folks like that, there is a time when we want to spend more time, but we first need to develop that skill of sati. So that if you're going to sit for an hour, that hour is full of remembering to look and to change, remembering to look and change, remember to look and to change. And every time we look and change, it goes up. And every time we look and change, it gets better and better. And every time we look, and in fact, we can actually begin to talk ourselves into feeling good. We've been talking ourselves into feeling bad our whole lives. That's what we've been doing. We've actually gotten examples of how to feel bad from our parents, our teachers, our siblings, everybody that we're around talks a young child into feeling bad. So everybody knows how to feel bad. We're experts at feeling bad. That's that wrong view. And so the right ordinary view would be buck up. get your act together, do what you're told to do. And then the child will again rebel from that. So, what we have to do is to remember to practice to come out of that duality, but that conversation between the adult and the child in the mind, and come into a wholesome state. So, this actually now is the introduction for correct practice. And um, I wouldn't say 10 minutes in the sense of 10 minutes a day, but rather if you're already practicing for an hour a day, let's take that hour and break it into 6 10-minute sessions so that every couple of hours you're going to stop. You might also even enjoy practicing in the sense of taking it down to only 5 minutes 12 times a day. Or maybe you can say it like this, that every hour you're going to drop whatever you're doing and practice coming back into a really wholesome state. Over and over and over again, we want to develop that quality of remembering to look at what the mind is doing, to remember to look at what the mind is doing and change. These are the first three things that are on the Eightfold Noble Path. And that's where that's actually listed in the sutta. The sutta says, and in fact, these three things run and circle around one another, which means then that they build. It's like a spiral staircase. As you keep practicing, they run and circle around each other, and we develop the skill. Now, in the beginning, most students think that it's really hard to make a change right from the very beginning. But if we keep remembering to look and to change, all three of these things begin to become developing skills. Once we have this going, that means that we can begin to change our attitude from, oh, this is a lot of work, or, oh, I don't want to do this, into, yeah, I can do this. Now, one of the things about feelings is that we almost always have some kind of fear built in. The fear of getting caught, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of retribution. Almost all of that has eventually down to the fear of getting eaten, the fear of dying. And so uh, we have to actually practice changing the way that we feel. And we could do that by talking ourselves into it, by noticing, looking. The reality is that each one of you right here, right now, is in a fairly safe place. You're not actually in danger, except for the thoughts that we have about, oh, I've got to go do this, and oh, I've got to go do that. And so we go back into that subliminal state of fear. And so by talking ourselves out of that into everything is actually okay right now, there's no danger, there's no worries. By having that kind of, let us say, happy talk, noble talk, wholesome talk, which means then that we're not asking a lot of questions. Well, what about this and what about that? And I heard the Buddha say this, and what about that over there? And all of those kind of questions, we now can see that all of them are unwholesome, because the practice, as I've just described, is actually quite easy. All you need to do is have three things, to know three things. And the first one on the block is to remember, and the second one is to look. And the third one is to change. We can do that in any posture. You can do it sitting at your desk. You can do it sitting on the floor in the wat. You can do it any place. But we need to keep doing it over and over and over again. And we need to do it with a mind that is fit for work. That in fact, that's part of the process of getting the mind fit for work. And sitting in meditation for an hour or two makes the mind dull, makes it not fit for work, keeps a lot of hindrances and a lot of desires and a lot of hopes going, rather than the actual experience of, this is good, this is okay, this is fine. So, as we practice those three things over and over and over again, we begin to change our attitude. We begin to change our feelings. We also can look at the body's posture and recognize that most of the long time sitting is uncomfortable in the body, and yet we're looking for good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, which means that if your body starts to have pain and stress, then the right thing to do is to adjust your posture happily so that you don't sit in pain for a long time. Now, I have seen, in fact, most of the ones that I have seen have been monks. They didn't stay monks, Westerns. I can name them by name of the ones that I know of. Since Katipalo is dead now, he was an Australian monk, but he ruined his legs. There was another German monk that I knew in Bangkok. He couldn't sit with the other monks. There's another monk named Subato who went to Malaysia. He was at Wat Suan Mok, but he couldn't tolerate sitting with the other monks, and so he left the Wat out of shyness or out of embarrassment because his legs hurt too much. Why does his leg hurt so much? Is because he strived to sit for a long period of time. It's very, very much like going into a gym. The first time you go in, or maybe the first week or so, maybe the first month, where a good gym instructor is going to have you do small weights repetitively over and over and over and over and over again, small weights, a dumbbell, until your arm gets tired, and then do the other arm. But when the arm gets tired, you stop. You don't keep going. So, if we can practice mentally that way of not taking much weight, then we begin to build these skills, which we can also think of it as kind of a mind muscle, that we develop this stuff so that over time we now can gain a longer sitting time without ever having to go into pain. It's a training process. You also probably have heard of the situation to where someone who is not well skilled in lifting weights will go into a gym and go immediately over to the heavy barbells. And he struggles and he tries to lift, and maybe he even hurts his back. Maybe he strains his legs because he's working too hard trying to lift things that he can't lift yet. And so, what we want to practice is the easy things, repeating them over and over again so that we can develop those muscles, those mind muscles, which basically means now we can remember easily and often to look at how we're thinking, to keep looking at what you're thinking and changing it into something more wholesome over and over and over again. When we do this, we begin to change our attitude. And our attitude is going to change from, oh, this is a lot of work. Oh, I don't want to do this, and all of those kind of childish things, or buck up, you could do this. You got that word, which would be the parent ego state, and come into a state to where, wow, this is good. This is nice. I like this. This is the way that we practice. Okay. So after we get our bodies comfortable and keep them comfortable, and after we come out of our fears and feel safe and secure and comfortable. And by the way, the best way to feel safe, secure, and comfortable is by going off by yourself. In the Anapanasati Sutta, it says specifically, go to the forest, go to a foot of a tree, go to an empty hut, go to a pile of straw, and sit down and bring sati to the fore. In other words, that's your starting point is with sati. Sati is to remembering to look over and over and over again and develop that skill. So we'll take a rest for just a moment and start asking people questions. Is everybody is getting this? How about you, Ben? Do you understand this three rule, kind of not rule, but three practices of remembering to look and to change, remembering to brighten and gladden the mind? You got
Totally.
that?
It works.
Yeah, it works. Here's someone who's a champion. He's got it. He knows. How about you, Timo? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think it works for me as well to a certain extent. Sometimes I get stuck on one of the steps, but eventually I get it working. Yeah.
All right. Well, stuck, what does that mean is that you're not using all three of these things. And the one that where we get the stuck the most is we forget to look at the fact that we're stuck. And so we just are stuck. Later on, we'll say, oh, I was stuck. But what we're missing out on is the fact that we can see that stuck is actually just another unwholesome thought. That's all it is. I'm stuck. And then we can say, wait a minute. No, I'm not. I can change that stuckness right now. We can take that right noble effort to change that stuckness. That's the way that we practice. So I'm glad that you brought that up, that sometimes you get stuck, which means sometimes you're just simply not paying attention. This is why we want to continue to develop Sati as a skill so that it's there anytime, every time. That's in fact the way that we begin to think is I'm going to look at what's going on without acting on it. I'm not going to be stuck because I'm not going to have stuck thoughts. I'm going to come out of that. And we practice that over and over and over again. So, Dietrich, how about you? What do you think?
Uh, Sorry, having problem. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sorry, I got some problems with the internet. It's working fine.
Yes, I can hear you until you turn your mute on. There you
Okay,
go.
there I am again. Yeah, so it works. The thing is, I have to keep on remembering doing it during. I do it in the morning, in the evening, but during the day. That's it.
If you do it more often than that, in fact, you can set an alarm on your cell phone and let it go off every hour. And every hour you have that idea, oh, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing and have fun. I'm going to stop
Yeah,
whatever I'm doing, stop complaining, and get the mind practiced. Okay. Because we want to
yeah,
keep practicing throughout the day. An easy, funny way of talking about it would be that the meditation. In fact, I've heard certain meditation teachers say, "Oh, you do 1 hour a day, you'll start to move slowly. If you do 2 hours a day, you'll move right along. If you do 3 hours a day, then that's going to be real progress." And my answer to that is, well, 3 hours a day, that means 21 hours a day. We're going to stay stuck in hindrances. That what we want to actually practice is spending as much time to develop this skill of sati, to remember, to look, and to make a change. These three things, if we do them throughout the day, actually progress will be much faster than if you practice once or twice or whatever.
yeah,
But you do it over and over and over again throughout the day. And then one of two things can happen. One of them is that between those sessions, once every hour, like at the end of 30 minutes, you'll remember again. And so you begin to have extra sessions of remembering to take a deep breath and to relax and to throw out all the unwholesome thoughts. The other possibility would be that by doing this very, very often, then that means that now we can sit longer and get good results from sitting longer because our attention span is going to be increasing. In fact, you could say that sati is just another word for attention span. To begin to remember longer. And so this is the way that we would practice. You want to practice it in the sense of more often, and then for longer periods of time. Now, that's different than, let us say, working heavy. That this is actually a very, very light kind of practice. It's not a heavy practice, and many meditation systems are actually quite heavy because you got to sit for a long time, you got to be still, and you got to deal with pain and all of that. To where this practice is not. This is actually much closer to what the Buddha taught than those sittings where people have to sit for long periods of time. It's better to spend more and more time always in a good state. Imagine that it's like this, that you've got a huge number of a big pallet full of cement bags. Every one of them weighs 100 pounds. And you've got to move those cement bags from where they were delivered to where they're needed. Which is the easy way to do, to try to drag yourself that whole pallet full of cement bags down the field and over the meadow, or picking up one bag and carrying it and then go to another bag. So we're looking at having to get little things done correctly rather than great big things done all at once. So that American expression, no pain, no gain, we're going to actually look at it more like no pain, no gain. We're not trying to get any gain. We're having too much fun here to try to get anything out of it. There's no place to go other than where we are right now. And so that's one of the wholesome things that we can say is everything is okay right now. No place to go and nothing to do. Wow, this is really great. All right, so we got others. How about you, Ivan? You have something to say?
I have nothing to say at the moment.
All right. How about you, Mikey? Do you have something to say?
Yeah, take the easy way. And also, someone had mentioned in the chat, so like I have a fractured leg. What can be wholesome thoughts on this? Maybe I can have the thought I can now rest more than before. And yeah, exactly. That's a wholesome thought. Can just rest and take it easy. What
All
joy.
right. So, moving right along, let us say that we have actually developed these three skills so that we're going to add a fourth item on the Eightfold Noble Path. Now, the fourth item is called Sammasankappa. Now, Sammasankappa is actually wrongly translated mostly. They translate it as thought, but we're already working with thought. Another translation would be intention, and that's closer to reality, but one that's more accurate would be attitude. All right, we're talking about a mental state of mind. And the mental state of mind that we're developing here is that everything is okay, and I've got that attitude. So that if I'm developing that attitude, then when Sati comes up later, we change our attitude from this is hard into this is easy, because it's only an attitude change. All failures, regardless of what kind of failure you're talking about, failure at school, failure in an exam, failure with your car, whatever you got, the failure is always just an attitude, the attitude of failure. But the same thing is true that all success, every success, is still a mental attitude. And it is where we're going now is to get the state where we begin to feel satisfied. And with that satisfaction, we feel successful. So satisfaction is part of sati. Actually, excuse me, it's part of sukha. That the qualities of sukha is feeling safe, secure, and comfortable, and that brings on satisfaction. Now, satisfaction actually is a state of sammasankappa, but we keep practicing over and over again, we're now developing the skill of samma-sankappa into the change of attitude, into the change of attitude of I can do it. Woohoo! You can also say that this samma-sankappa is the attitude that develops into the attitude of being a lion. The Buddha was known as a lion. He was in charge of whatever place that he was. He was never a victim. He was always on top of the situation. Now, this is actually something that can be developed. We develop it by having a sense of satisfaction over and over and over again. And as we develop that sense of satisfaction, we gain confidence. Now, the Pali word for confidence is sada. The Sanskrit is shraddha. And what that means is often translated into the word faith. But this is more than faith. This is evidence. The first evidence comes from your teacher, that you can see that he has that confidence. And so you can begin to practice the sati to develop the mind by looking and changing and coming into a state of satisfaction. With that satisfaction practiced over and over again becomes that samma-sankappa, that real attitude change. Woohoo, I've got this. Everything is all right. So when you're 45 minutes into the meditation, if you're practicing like that, then you can still come to that state of, yeah, this is so great. Wow, we've got this. I can do this. I'm the lion. I don't have to wait for that bell to ring. In fact, I'm going to sit here longer after the bell is rung. I've got it. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. These 4 items, they run and circle around one another, developing each other, so that we have sati to remember. In fact, that sati, remembering, is the thing that comes first, and then looking, seeing exactly what's going on within the mind, and then making a modification to that, almost as if you're climbing stairs, so that you get up to the point of feeling satisfied. And then one more step is up to success. Got it. And then one more step after that would be what we could refer to as wealthy. You've got it so much that it just spills out everywhere. Your bucket is full and it's leaking, it's overflowing. That wealthiness then is what you would refer to as that lion's place. So, with these 4 things coming together, running and circling around each other, this is where samadhi mind comes in. We've got the mind unified. It's no longer divided between wrong view of the child and ordinary right view of the parent. Now it's in reality. And so the right organization of mind then is when the mind becomes unified. Unification into that place that you could think of as lion's position. The attitude of the lion, the attitude of, oh, I got this. I don't have to worry about anything. There's also, he was referred to as a bull. Now we're talking about here, not a male cow, but a bull was referred to as a bull elephant. And so you can think of it like this. Imagine that you're drinking water. There the elephant is. And a crocodile comes up and snaps him by the nose. What is the elephant going to do? He's going to start flailing back and forth and giving that alligator and that crocodile a really hard time. He's not going to succumb. He's going to just play with it. So this is how we begin to recognize anything that grabs us by the nose. Play with it. We've got that attitude of we've got it wired. And that attitude then comes into that unification of mind, your whole. This is also referred to as noble. You don't get into spats. You don't get into fights. What you get into is a good state of mind and keep it there. So when the mind is noble, when the mind is unified, it doesn't want anything. Here is where behavior comes in. When you don't want anything, that means that you're unlikely to kill somebody to get it. This is sila, this is morality. In other words, when your mind is unified, organized, and noble, then your behavior is genuine. It's okay. And you're not harming yourself, you're not harming others. So your behavior, your speech, and your livelihood become perfected. This is what we mean by the features of the state of mind of unification. When the mind is unified, our behavior is good enough. We're not harming anyone. However, ordinary Buddhism starts with trying to get people to behave themselves because that's where we need the society to be. We can't make the whole society into a prison. That we got to give people freedom, but we want them to behave in a certain way so that we can maintain society. That's the ordinary thought. But the noble way of looking at it is, hey, I'm not doing anything wrong because I don't want anything. Everything is great. So this is the Eightfold Noble Path, and it starts with Sati. You have to remember to look, to make a change, and then develop that attitude of Samma Sankappa leading to the unification of mind. The unification of mind, then, that state is used for your behavior. This is all in that Sutra number 117, and I invite everybody to read that Sutra fairly soon from now so that what I've said today will be fresh on your mind, because that Sutra, the way that it's written, is extremely complicated. It's hard to understand. But if you take this version that I've given you, this simplified way of looking at it, then you can see how it works. Now, here's one more point, and that is that the name of the sutta is the Great 40. Well, how can you get eightfold nobles anything into 40? The answer is that at the end of the sutta, it adds two additional features. One is knowledge. Now, we're talking about knowledge that's in the sense of wisdom, because you keep looking, we keep seeing reality over and over again. We develop a memory base of seeing the way things are in reality, become quite wise. We have knowledge. And with that, anytime anything comes up, we can catch it quickly, easily, and dispose of it. This is often translated as deliverance. We are delivered from our unwholesome qualities. We can use another word like freedom, relinquishment, don't care, not carrying anything. This is what we mean by that deliverance. And with a little bit of time that we've got left, I would like to introduce now the Sambojana. Now, the Eightfold Noble Path and the Sambojana are intricately related, in a way that the Sambojana actually translates into the 7 factors of awakening. The Eightfold Noble Path is the path that we take to get to the Sambojana, so that instead of just occasionally or 10 minutes every hour or so of sati, it's developed to be unremitting. Unremitting sati, unremembering, unremitting. Now, what does unremitting mean? Is over and over and over and over, about once every 2 or 3 seconds. We keep coming back to remembering to look at what's going on. Come back and kind of hang out in reality, rather than hanging out in what we want and don't want, and not hanging out in what things should be, but hanging out in a marvelous reality. This is the Sambojana. And if you look at it, you can actually find the Sambojana in several suttas. One is in number 10 in the Satipatthana Sutta, and also in the Anapanasati Sutta. But basically, the Sambojana is what we're looking for. is to get into those states so that you have unremitting mindfulness, so that you have unremitting investigation, and your unremitting effort becomes actually energetic. So that the fourth one then is unremitting peace. Unremitting happiness is number 4. Piti Sukha is what it's called. That state of feeling safe, secure, comfortable, satisfied, and that wow state of, wow, we've got this. And then the next one would be peace. Well, peace is actually built into the Anapanasati Sutta also in the sense of being at rest with the body. So we have those things: unremitting mindfulness, unremitting sati, unremitting investigation, unremitting energy or effort, unremitting happiness, joy, that sense of satisfaction, that sense of success, followed by being at peace. These 5 things then lead into that samadhi mind again, that feeling of wholeness, that feeling of holiness, that feeling of unification, that you're at one with the world, you're at one with your environment, you're in atonement, you're in tune. And with that, the last item on that list is then what is called unremitting upekkha. And what upekkha is actually balance. Now, it's a dynamic balance in the sense of any wind that blows, you can handle that wind. If you're on the deck of a ship and the deck is moving back and forth with the waves, you can maintain your posture. You can maintain your balance so that nothing bothers you. Basically, the easy way to think of that is that when you've let go of anything and you're not carrying anything, then being able to stand is easy. You're balanced because you don't carrying any load. So, let me see. Chris, what do you think about this? Have I touched the bases that we needed to touch for you?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, I mean, it doesn't talk about the role of formal sitting. I think that's a different topic, right?
Well, no, it's the same topic. In fact, I just covered that, possibly not enough, is that when people are doing too much formal sitting, they don't have the skills that they need, that we need to practice more often so that we have the skills so that our formal sittings, our long sittings are more productive more of the time. But I'm not
So
saying
when
don't
you
ever do it. Go ahead.
when I hear you speak in this way, I hear you say you don't need to sit in the floor. You can just meditate for 10 minutes a day a lot of times. Is that
Right.
right?
For the first couple
Okay.
of years.
So formal sitting is not important. I mean, that's not the starting point for training your mind. The starting point is mindfulness.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. The starting point is sati. The starting point is actually looking at what we're doing and making a change to it. And jumping into formal practice is not necessary, and often it's painful, it's dangerous, and that it's counterproductive. It's not good in the beginning. That in fact, you could say that formal sitting is good in the middle, only when you practice correctly in the beginning. That nowhere in the Eightfold Noble Path, nowhere in this sutta, nowhere in the Anapanasati Sutta does it say you've got to clock yourself at 1 hour. In fact, the Buddha did not even have a clock. Now, the story is that what they did have was joss sticks or incense sticks, and that when the incense stick burned down and went out, which is about 20 minutes or so, 10 or 20 minutes for a joss stick, then the mosquitoes come in and tell you all about it. And so it's time for a break to get up and relight the incense stick and then sit back down. So that we're not sitting for long, long periods of time. Now, what that will do is that will help us to develop being able to sit longer and longer. But we don't want to start sitting a long time because we're not ready to sit for a long time. Because when you are sitting for a long time, you're in pain. You're not remembering to practice correctly. You're wasting most of your sitting time And so the thing to do is to get ready for those barbells of sitting by doing the dumbbells repeatedly over and over again. You can walk around the gym doing dumbbells. You have to stand right where those barbells are. And so it's a multi-step process. Go ahead.
It's a beautiful talk. I would just put in a plug for sitting too, because I mean, when you have the time to learn how to sit, and then you do it for long enough that you learn how to generate joy, piti, that's a big confidence booster. It gives you energy and drive to get to the next place.
All right. But did you hear what you just said? If you sit long enough, you'll have joy. You'll have energy.
I didn't mean clock time with my butt on the floor at one time. I said if you practice this over a period of time with persistence and diligence so that you learn how to sit, then things come magically.
Right. So why not just start practicing this at other times? Let us say that you start with having some sitting time, but you're not developing sati the way that we're talking about sati. We're talking about having it often, over and over again throughout the day.
That's sati.
Sati. Sati does not require sitting. Sati requires whatever posture you're in, reclining or walking or standing still, whatever you're doing. Here's an example. You're in line at the bank. Are you going to say, oh, I don't like being at the bank. I don't like being in line. Oh, I'm miserable, because that's what everybody does. But if you have to go to the bank, why not enjoy standing in line? Wow, this is good. I'm happy. I'm comfortable, because we're practicing sati right there in line at the bank. How about on the bus? Buses are not normally used for meditation time. We want to have a meditation hall with incense and monks and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm riding the bus, and the bus is bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. Why can't I right then and there saying, oh, I can enjoy the bouncing. I don't have to hate it. I don't have to be uncomfortable. I can practice wherever I am all the time, anytime that I can remember to practice. This is how we build that up so that your sitting time in formal meditation gets really good, really fast.
Jhanas that way?
Hmm?
I know you're gonna light into me on this, but can you get to jhanas with sati?
Actually, yes, that's what the Anapanasati Sutta is all about.
Yeah, the Anapanasati Sutta says a monk sits down under a tree, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah.
So he's formal sitting. That's formal sitting, which some teachers often, maybe I just read things the wrong way. They confuse the words. They use the word samadhi as a synonym for mind training, but for sitting.
I know.
And also for jhanas.
But that's not what the sutta reads.
But that's what people run across, right? If we're
they're
to
taught.
explain things.
That's why we want to make sure that enough of the noble Dhamma is out there in the world so that people can gain that part that they're missing.
Right.
Okay. That there's something else to be done. And that is the development of the ability to make a change wherever you are. At the bank, on the bus, sitting on the couch, anywhere that we are, to where formal sitting requires stuff. In fact, one of the things that is said about Anapanasati is that you've got everything you need with you all the time. You've got your breath, you've got your feelings, you've got everything with you. But formal sitting has more of the, oh, we've got to go get this, we got to go get a cushion or a sitting mat, Oh, we've got to have a special room for it. Oh, we've got to have an altar. Oh, we've got to have monks to chant. Oh, we need this, that, and the other thing in the formal system, to where Anapanasati, the way that we're talking about it here, you've got everything you need all the time. All you have to do is remember to put it into service, put it into use.
I think the difference between these two things for me is that mindfulness is the goal for all your waking moments, always aware.
Precisely. So practice
And,
often.
but still, in addition to that, there are times where you sit and don't do, you're not, mindfulness is, you can practice mindfulness in your workaday life all the time, right? Everything's going on and you're aware. You remember to be aware.
Mhm.
But there's also a role for sitting, where
Okay.
you stop, you pause, you push all the world away and you go inside to your mind or your
Yes.
body. Start with your body.
Right. Now, that
Right.
does not require formal sitting. However, I would like to say this. First off, you're a monk. You have already been deeply into the Dhamma long enough to where you have changed your whole life so that
Yeah.
you can devote it to that sitting time. And I would expect you to have this argument. In fact, I would be unhappy if you agreed with me 100%, because you are making the point, but it's the point of that as we progress in the Dhamma, we're going to spend more and more time in actual sitting so that we can develop those skills to come into that state of a samadhi mind. But many people that there's, I'm not sure, maybe Ivan or Dean and several others have talked about that with this method, you can develop the first jhana. It can be done. And not only that, but by practicing Anapanasati correctly, that's the whole point of Anapanasati. And that it needs to be done. In fact, I would say that it's very difficult to gain first jhana while driving a car. However, if you practice mindfulness while driving, you're less likely to have an accident because you're keeping your eye on the road, you're watching where you're going, and you actually will then make it to the meditation hall where you can sit down and get really quiet and then develop that first jhana completely. Now, the whole point here, again, now the third step, the first one being practice, 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 and then the second one is formal, formal, formal sitting. The third one would be after you get up from the formal sitting, that you're now in first jhana, can you actually stand up and start walking around while still in first jhana? And that would be what we would want. That's where it comes back to where the Buddha was talking about, that now the first jhana becomes your path to enlightenment because you're in the first jhana all the time because you practiced it so that you have unremitting mindfulness. And then the other factors will come in, your unremitting mindfulness and unremitting investigation, your unremitting um, change, your unremitting right noble effort will then bring you to that point of unremitting attitude. The attitude of everything is so wonderful. And that's where the first jhana actually has all the factors. And you do have to sit in order to do that. But you can get there much faster by practicing more often.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Daniel, he left. I wanted to talk with Daniel. Where'd he go? Oh, never mind.
He said in the chat
Karwan,
a minute ago.
Karwan, what do you think? It's turned into 3 dots. Oh, there you are. So, Karwan, what do you think? Okay. Amo, what do you think?
Really good talk, Dhammarato. Thank you so much.
I didn't quite catch what you said.
I said it was a really good talk. Thank you so much.
All right. Micah, can you help me out with what she said?
Yeah, she said it was a really good talk. Thank you so much.
All right. I noticed that we have quite a number of new people here. Dream and Carl and no, that's our Carl. And Prasad, welcome. I'm glad you guys can come to the call. And I hope that you get benefit out of it enough to where you can start practicing.
Yeah, thank you so much for talk.
All right. So, Timo, do you have anything to say?
By the way, I have one question. Can you like answer it, please?
All right, let's make it a short one.
Yeah, like, do you mean do like wholesome thought, small time, many time? Like, does it mean like do like mindfulness and everything like very small time, but many time?
I'm not
Some,
a fan of saying all the time because that means then that you're
I mean,
failing when
many.
you're not doing it all the time. But what I would say instead is develop the skill of
Uh-huh.
remembering often,
Like,
developing that skill so that you can keep coming back and keep coming back to it.
well, yeah, like I said, many time, not all time.
Okay,
Okay.
and good. All right. So, Mikey, why don't you take this thing home? I'll guess you can get in touch with Daniel later.
Yeah, thank you, friends, for being here today. This has been a splendid call. Also, we have a guest speaker in a couple of days, Dr. William Chu. If you'd like to come join us for that talk, go ahead and click the events tab and show that you're interested. But yeah, just once again repeating that we did raise enough money for the OSF bike, and want to thank everybody for that. And also thank you for our volunteers as well. People such as Ivan and Ben have really been contributing a lot here in the Sangha. So thank you. Keep hanging out, and such a joy to see that.
All right. Anybody have any last things to say? Okay, good. Thank you all for coming. This has been a delightful conversation. I very much appreciated everyone coming.